As negotiations increase, and it looks more and more likely that Europe will be sending up to 200 tanks to Ukraine, the Daily Telegraph, for example, says this is a hammer blow for Putin. Yes, in one sense, it is something that could seriously impact the progress of this war and would at least allow Mr. Zelensky the opportunity of moving into the Donbass and retaking some of those regions that have been seized illegally by Putin. Whether this also gives Mr. Zelensky the opportunity of moving into Crimea is an entirely different matter. And that, I think, the Crimean option is a decisive one. And I would suggest that is decisive in a much more dangerous and worrying direction. Because when his back is against the wall, Mr. Putin may feel that it's time, in his case, also to up the stakes. Mr. Putin cannot afford to lose Crimea. It's as simple as that. If he loses Crimea, he loses dignity, he loses access to the deep sea port, and he loses face. At the same time, Russia loses a military standing. The propaganda is being put out that this is all an attack by NATO on Russia, that NATO and the West is Russophobic. A lot of this is absurd, and history simply will not support that interpretation, but history doesn't have to. The only interpretation that is necessary is the one supported by the domestic audience. And as I have kept saying again and again and again, that is the war that needs to be fought. That is the battle that must be won by NATO, by the West, if Mr. Putin is to be pushed out of Ukraine. We really have three objectives. The first is to get Putin out of Ukraine, particularly out of the 4 regions that he illegally accessed. The second is to rehabilitate Russia, to find a way for Russia to deal with the world again. Now, that possibly means the resignation of Mr. Putin, his replacement by a democratically elected successor, but that will not be a democratically elected successor in any ordinary sense unless there is a rethink at the top of Russian political society. So simply replacing Putin with one of the immediate Kremlin guard will probably not be a good thing. So we need a complete rethink, which means we need an opportunity to reach out to the wider Russian Republic, and not with propaganda, but with a serious correction. At the moment, we in the West can be accused of the same sort of propaganda battle that Putin is fighting in the East. That needs to change. We need to change that rhetoric. We need to make it clear that we are fair, that we can be as critical of our own society as we are of his, that we can be appraising of our own society and of his, that we are detached, that we are objective. We need all the skills of our years of journalism to deal with the danger of the propaganda, the domestic propaganda that Putin is putting out. And we need to be doing that now. Thirdly, and most importantly, we need an exit plan for Putin himself. And that may well involve a trial. But an exit with dignity at the moment is the only way that we are going to avoid escalation. and that needs to be clear. So, although we need to support Mr. Zelensky, although we need to support Ukraine, we also need to think about the end game. And we need to think about an end game which is realistic, not one which is out to do the most damage to the enemy that we possibly can. There is a possibility that we need a fourth objective, which is to refashion our world order, to rethink the role of NATO, to rethink the nature of NATO, as well as the nature of the Russian military machine as well. But we need to do some rethinking. If our world is to survive the next few years, it needs to do so with some serious thought, because the situation we've inherited from the end of World War II is not up to the job. That is clear.